Remember when the Old West got ambushed by a sitcom? Troop was exactly that kind of show. It took cavalry uniforms, frontier forts, and Indian raids, threw in pure 1960s absurdity, and somehow made it all work. You had Ken Barry as Captain Wilton Parmenter, a decorated hero perpetually one nervous breakdown away from collapse. Forrest Tucker as Sergeant Orr, running Fort Courage like a personal side hustle convention. Larry Storch as Corporal Agarn, generating enough panic and chaos for 3 entire sitcoms. And Frank DeCova as Chief Wild Eagle, somehow the only sane man in the entire territory. It kicked off on ABC in 1965, and even though it ran for only 2 seasons and 65 episodes, Troop carved out a place in television history that felt way bigger than its actual run. A Western spoof on the surface, but underneath a show that treated the entire frontier like one giant setup for a punchline and somehow made it work every single week. Today we are heading back to Fort Courage for 15 weird facts you probably never knew about Troop. From teenage casting scams and hidden dirty jokes to surprise guest stars, backstage chaos, and one of the strangest cancellations of the entire 1960s. But before we saddle up, hit like, subscribe to remember when, and share this with that friend who still remembers Agarn and that gloriously broken down fort better than any actual history lesson. Now, let us get into the countdown. Number 15. Melody Patterson conned her way onto the show. Wrangler Jane always came across as the only person in town with a functioning brain, a steady income, and a basic understanding of how civilization worked. She ran the trading post, handled the mail, worked the telegraph, and stayed sane living next door to Fort Courage, which already made her more qualified than anyone within a 10-mile radius. What most people never knew was that Patterson was only 15 when she auditioned, claiming she was 18 and would be done with school by her next birthday. Some reports say she backed that up with a forged birth certificate. Producers did not figure it out until she had already filmed 7 episodes. By then, she had so thoroughly won everyone over that they kept her anyway, but made one quiet adjustment. The writers deliberately toned down the romance between Jane and Captain Parmenter, played by 32-year-old Ken Barry. When you do that math, it makes complete sense. That adjustment also accidentally created one of the show's best running gags, Parmenter nervously rebuffing Jane's advances every time she got too close. Turns out that was not a character quirk. That was a carefully constructed workaround. And honestly, that makes Patterson feel even more perfect for a show built entirely on con men, accidental heroes, and frontier chaos. Number 14. Don Rickles showed up and tried to take over the fort. Just when you thought Troop could not get any stranger, in walked Don Rickles, the human flamethrower in a suit, a man who could insult an entire room and still leave as the hero. He guest starred as Bald Eagle, the long-estranged son of Chief Wild Eagle, so bloodthirsty and unpredictable that no other Indians would follow him. So naturally, he decided to attack Fort Courage entirely by himself. Chaos ensued in every direction. And how did Captain Parmenter resolve a one-man assault on a United States Army fort? He threw the man a birthday party. Not a trap. An actual birthday party. Because that is precisely how Fort Courage handled its security threats. Only at this fort could a one-man military assault end with a birthday cake on the table. Number 13. The tribal name was a dirty joke the entire time. The Hikawi tribe always had this quality of the show winking directly at you. But the strangest part is that their name was literally constructed from a joke. According to the show's own lore, the Hikawi name came from a lost tribe falling off a cliff and repeatedly crying out, "Where the heck are we?" Which means one of the most memorable tribal names in 1960s television was essentially a punchline stretched into an entire civilization. And that was not even the original version. The tribe was initially supposed to be called the Fugawi, as in a tribe lost in tall grass jumping up and down shouting something that rhymes with where the, and if you need that explained, just ask your parents. Network censors at ABC flagged it immediately for sounding far too close to something that was never going to survive on prime-time television in 1965. So the writers swapped it for Hekawi, kept the exact same joke completely intact, and walked away with a perfectly censor-approved punchline. Same setup, different rapper, nobody at the network any the wiser. Number 12. The show was secretly smuggling 1960s culture into the Old West the entire time. There is a specific moment watching F Troop when it stops looking like a quirky Western comedy and reveals itself as a full-on 1960s cultural satire that simply happened to own a bunch of cavalry uniforms. The show was never interested in historical accuracy. It was deliberately dragging modern culture into the 1860s frontier and daring you not to notice. One of the clearest examples was the play Brave Club, a completely transparent parody of the Playboy Club, dreamed up by Orr and Agarn as their latest scheme. A Season 2 episode featured a Beatles parody act called The Bedbugs, performed by a real Los Angeles group called The Factory, wearing modified 1860s military uniforms designed to evoke the mod mop-top look of 1960s British pop. They performed a rock version of Lemon Tree and convinced Corporal Agarn to quit the army and manage their band. Or immediately formed a rival band called the Termites, and Wrangler Jane delivered a version of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man set in the 1860s, all with a completely straight face. The Factory also happened to feature a young Lowell George on guitar and Richie Hayward on drums, both of whom went on to co-found Little Feat, one of the most celebrated cult rock bands of the entire 1970s. Number 11. F Troop was cancelled while it was still winning. F Troop was not a struggling series that quietly slipped off television because nobody was watching. During its final season, the show ranked 40th out of 113 programs with a 31.3 share. Solid, comfortable, respectable numbers. It was actually outperforming its lead in Batman during the back half of that season. Under normal circumstances, a show performing at that level would confidently expect at least one more season. So what happened? Warner Brothers sold to Seven Arts in 1967, and the new owners had completely different priorities. Cutting costs, consolidating assets. They were not interested in maintaining existing hits just because audiences enjoyed them. The switch from black and white to color in Season 2 had significantly increased production costs, and executives decided the large Warner Ranch set used for Fort Courage was wasteful real estate for a half-hour sitcom. They wanted that land back. So a show still winning its time slot got canceled because a new ownership group decided the property underneath the fort was worth more than the ratings it was generating. One of the most cold-blooded network decisions of the entire decade. Number 10. Sergeant Orr was running a full business empire out of a military post. If you ever sensed that Orr was not giving 100% to the United States Army, congratulations, you understood F Troop perfectly. One of the show's funniest built-in jokes was that Orr was operating a small but thriving frontier business empire from inside a military installation that genuinely looked like it should have been condemned years earlier. Rations and pay were officially drawn for 30 soldiers at Fort Courage, but only 17 were actually present. The other 13 were logged as Indian scouts, so stealthy they only appeared after dark and vanished before dawn. That was the story Orr presented to any inspecting officer unfortunate enough to pass through. The extra pay and rations flowed straight into Orc Enterprises, his expanding portfolio of frontier side hustles, prominently featuring a brisk trade in authentic Hikawi souvenirs. On any other show, that behavior would make him the villain. On F Troop, it simply made him the shrewdest businessman in the entire territory. Number 9. The Medicine Man was one of Hollywood's most accomplished veterans. You probably remember Roaring Chicken as the warmly confused and endearingly ineffective Hikawi medicine man, the shuffling elder who dispensed advice that never quite applied and made predictions that never quite landed. Funny character, easy to laugh at. But almost nobody watching ever suspected who was actually underneath that black wig. Everett Horton had been working in Hollywood since 1922, appeared in over 120 films, and performed alongside Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in Top Hat, The Gay Divorcee, and Shall We Dance. He had collaborated with Ernst Lubitsch and Frank Capra and been a fixture of Broadway, radio, and the stage for decades. By the time he walked onto the F Troop set, he was carrying 57 years of professional experience and was 79 years old, finally joining his first live-action television series as a regular. You likely already knew his voice without knowing his face. He was the narrator of fractured fairy tales on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. When a reporter asked him about joining F Troop, Horton made it clear he had no great love for television generally, but F Troop was different. He would watch it, he said, even if it killed him. For a man who preferred his comfortable chair and his privacy, that was practically a standing ovation. Number 8. The Alamo joke was actually rooted in reality. Trooper Duffy was the cantankerous old soldier in the background who could not stop telling anyone within earshot that he had personally stood shoulder to shoulder with Davy Crockett at the Alamo. It played as a throwaway running gag, the kind of joke you chuckle at and immediately move past. But Bob Steele, the actor playing Duffy, had actually appeared in a 1926 silent film called With Davy Crockett at the Fall of the Alamo. The writers were crafting a joke specifically about the actor delivering it, and almost the entire audience was never in on it. Steele had accumulated credits in more than 400 westerns going back to the silent era, was a genuine B-Western star and box office draw in the 1930s, had worked with John Wayne, appeared in The Big Sleep, and played Curly in Of Mice and Men to some of the best reviews of his career. Then, at 59, he turned up as a bumbling background soldier on a comedy that spent 2 seasons gleefully mocking everything his career had ever represented. That is about as full circle as it gets. Number 7. Chief Wild Eagle was not played by a Native American. Chief Wild Eagle was played by Frank Dova, a character actor of Italian ancestry, because 1960s television casting operated largely on the philosophy of close enough. The remarkable thing is that Dova was so genuinely good in the role that most viewers simply never questioned it. He played Wild Eagle with perfect deadpan dignity, like the only reasonable adult surrounded entirely by lunatics. Where the Army celebrated Captain Parmenter as the scourge of the West, Wild Eagle had a different red entirely. He called him the Great White Pigeon. One small phrase that immediately painted the complete portrait of a nervous, flapping, hopelessly confused commanding officer. By modern standards, the casting is rightly considered cultural appropriation, and it should be. But within the world of F Troop, Frank Dakova earned everything. He got one perfectly timed deadpan at a time. Number 6. On the F Troop set, nobody was ever safe. If the show always felt one wrong step from flying completely off the rails, that is because it genuinely kind of was. The cast regularly rewrote lines or improvised right before filming, not out of artistic rebellion but as deliberate psychological warfare designed to throw fellow cast members off balance and generate genuinely real reactions on camera. Frank Dakova was one of the most committed practitioners, known for rewriting dialogue minutes before filming and occasionally changing lines mid-scene purely to watch guest stars experience visible panic in real time. Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch participated enthusiastically, regularly abandoning the script to surprise each other and everyone nearby. The directors eventually stopped fighting it entirely because the chaos kept producing the show's funniest moments. A lot of sitcoms work hard to project polish. F Troop looked like it was being held together by duct tape and barely contained panic. And that was precisely the magic. Number 5. Ken Berry was almost absurdly overqualified for the chaos he was asked to perform. Before arriving at Fort Courage looking perpetually confused and seconds away from humiliation, Berry was already surprisingly overqualified for the assignment. He had served in the U.S. Army under none other than Leonard Nimoy, who recognized something in him, encouraged him to pursue acting, and even connected him with agents. That military background gave Berry genuine physical authenticity. He knew how to stand like an officer, deliver orders convincingly, and carry himself as though he absolutely belonged in uniform. The problem was F Troop had zero interest in dignity. It wanted chaos, specifically the kind where a commanding officer assembles his full confident bearing for 3 seconds before being turned into a human lawn dart. Fortunately, Berry was also a trained professional dancer, giving him the body control and physical timing to make even the most absurd slapstick look completely effortless and spontaneous. Every stumble appeared entirely accidental, and that is among the hardest things a physical comedian can actually accomplish. Number 4. Captain Parmenter became a war hero by sneezing at exactly the right moment. Parmenter did not arrive at Fort Courage as a battle-hardened frontier legend. He got there because he accidentally became a hero in the most perfectly F Troop way possible. During the Battle of Appomattox, he was a private in the Quartermaster Corps sent to retrieve his commander's laundry. On the way back, he suffered an allergy attack. His violent sneezing fit was mistaken by nearby Union soldiers as a dramatic rallying cry to charge. They followed him. The battle turned. The army awarded him the Medal of Honor, dubbed him the Scourge of Appomattox, promoted him to captain, and then quietly shipped him off to Fort Courage, a remote outpost traditionally used as a dumping ground for the military's most thoroughly useless personnel. Parmenter also holds the additional distinction of being the only soldier believed to have received a Purple Heart for being injured during the presentation of a medal, when his father, also his commanding officer, accidentally pricked him in the chest with the pin. Number 3. The Parmenter family name was carrying an enormous running joke. While Wilton was busy being outsmarted by his own troops, the show was quietly running a layered background joke hiding in plain sight. The Parmenter family tree read like a mythology textbook. His father was General Thor Parmenter, named for the Norse god of thunder. His uncle was Colonel Jupiter Parmenter, king of the Roman gods. His second cousin was Lieutenant Colonel Hercules Parmenter. His first cousin was Major Achilles Parmenter. His great-grandfather was Major Hannibal Parmenter, who supposedly fought alongside George Washington at Valley Forge. Thunder gods, Roman emperors, Greek warriors, legendary conquerors, all of them Parmenters. And then there was Wilton. Not Hercules, not Thor, but Wilton, a name that sounds less like a military dynasty and considerably more like someone managing a modest insurance office in Hartford. The writers chose it deliberately because it was soft, forgettable, and completely heroism-proof. Every time someone said Captain Wilton Parmenter out loud, the contrast with his family tree did the entire joke by itself. Number 2. Sergeant Orr was essentially Professor Harold Hill in a cavalry uniform. Before Forrest Tucker ever set foot at Fort Courage, he had spent 5 years on the road playing Professor Harold Hill in the national touring production of The Music Man. 2008 performances. A 56-week run at the Schubert Theater in Chicago alone. 5 years of perfecting the art of selling an elaborate con to an entire town and walking away completely clean. Then he walked directly into the role of Sergeant Morgan Orr. Different costume, identical playbook. Tucker's years as the professor proved he could simultaneously do comedy and sell a scheme with total conviction. That specific skill, looking a man dead in the eye while running a scheme directly beneath his nose and making the whole arrangement feel completely reasonable, was precisely what F Troop demanded every single week. By the time the show came along, Tucker had essentially been rehearsing the role of Orr for half a decade. He simply traded the 76 trombones for a cavalry uniform and a phantom roster of fictional Indian scouts. Number 1. Larry Storch was a one-man comedy department. If F Troop had one cast member who appeared specifically engineered to generate trouble, steal every scene, and make everyone around him look like they were barely keeping pace, it was Larry Storch. As Corporal Agarn, he brought an energy that made the entire show feel like someone had quietly added espresso to the water supply. And apparently one character was not nearly enough for the man. In the episode Old Iron Pants, Storch played 5 entirely distinct characters, Agarn plus 4 relatives, including a French-Canadian fur trapper, a Mexican bandit, a Russian from Moscow, and Granny Agarn. This was not a slap-on-a-fake mustache situation. Storch had genuine old-school comedy chameleon ability, completely different voices, physical rhythms, and a total personality transplant per character, and he landed every single one cleanly. He was running a fully realized one-man sketch show inside a sitcom and making it look completely effortless. The industry noticed. Storch earned a 1967 Emmy nomination for Outstanding Continued Performance by an actor in a leading role in a comedy series, thoroughly deserved for someone setting the entire comedic temperature of the show from the inside. He made Agarn foolish without making him boring, frantic without making him exhausting, and ridiculous without ever tipping into pure cartoon territory, even though honestly, he was about 3 bad decisions away from that line at any given moment. He lost the Emmy to his lifelong childhood friend Don Adams, who won that year for Get Smart. Storch joked afterward that at least the award stayed with someone he knew, which is either the most gracious response to losing an Emmy ever recorded, or the most elegantly delivered trash talk in television awards history. Quite possibly both simultaneously. And there you have it. 15 weird and wildly entertaining facts about F Troop. Which one surprised you the most? And what is your favorite F Troop moment whenever it pops up in reruns? Let us know in the comments. Hit like if Fort Courage still cracks you up. Subscribe to Remember When for more deep dives into the shows we all grew up with, and share this with that friend who still thinks Larry Storch was the human equivalent of a cartoon sound effect. Until next time, this is Remember When.